Hello, Buddy. Lovely to meet you.
And you too, Liam. Good to be with you.
Do you like to be called Buddy?
Yeah, that's my nickname.
Okay.
The only other name that I've used was Rufus.
Okay.
And there's a little story behind that. But when I moved to Nashville, it was to play in the band of Jerry Reed, who was a famous country music entertainer, movie star guy back in the 70s and 80s mostly. And so anyway, I was in his band, and there was a Buddy already in the band. So he was trying to make up another name for me so he could keep us distinguished on stage. And I had this middle name, Rufus, that I had never used, but I always loved it because, Rufus, it's just got all this character, So I suggested he call me Rufus, and he loved that. So to avoid confusion with new friends I was making and everything in Nashville, I just started introducing myself as Rufus. And so for the first 4 or 5 years while I had that job, that was the name I went by. And I still have old friends from that period. When they see me, they go, "Hey, Rufus, what's going on?" And I did a project about 20 years ago, and that I called Rufus, and it was sort of just a celebration of my musical roots.
Yeah.
So anyway, you can call me Rufus or Buddy, either one.
I know a Rufus, actually. There's a Rufus who lives just down the road from me, and he's a harmonica player.
Give him my regards.
Yeah, I will do. Where are you calling from?
Brentwood, Tennessee, which is just south of Nashville.
Okay. And have you spent a lot of time in Nashville?
Yes, I've been here. I moved up from my native state of Georgia in 1984 after commuting for about a year, and so it's been our home in this area since then.
What about the music of Nashville? What's your kind of relationship with the history of the music there?
Well, I moved up to play in the band of Jerry Reed, who was a popular country music entertainer at the time, great guitar player and songwriter. So it was like the big break for me. I'd been playing, bars and taverns and parties and things down in Georgia. So this was my first chance to play at a sort of a national level and tour the country and be in studios and just learn. I mean, the learning curve went way up for me at that point. And it moved me to Nashville, which is something I had been wanting to do anyway, and see if I had what it took to make it in a town like that. And so, it became just a place for me to hone my skills, to play music clubs, to make connections with other musicians, with publishers, producers, just the whole ball of wax, And it was a great move because I really didn't know probably up until then if I could make it in the world of music. And but like I say, I was on a steep learning curve, and by some hard work and the grace of God, I'm still here.
Did you come across Charlie McCoy at all?
Yeah, I actually made a pilgrimage up here in the late 70s. It might have been even 1980 or so to meet Charlie. And a friend arranged for us to meet one day at a studio where Charlie was working, and then so I got to sit in on a session and then take him out for a beer afterwards and just sort of bend his ear, and ask him all kinds of questions. He was totally gracious, and about 3 or 4 years later, when I was playing with Jerry, we actually did a benefit concert that Charlie was sponsoring up in his native state of West Virginia, and I got to share the stage with him for the first time. And then our paths crossed again probably in the 90s. I sent him some of the recorded work that I had done, and we corresponded a little bit. And then, the long story short is we started making friends over the years, and now I usually check in with him every month or so by phone, and we get together for lunch, and he's played on my records and I played on his, so that's been a real dream come true. He
was over in London, and I sat down with him in the kind of green room at this show he was doing, and we had a chat. And as you say, he was gracious and he was humble, and I just couldn't believe the amount of records he'd been on. I mean, I knew he'd done all the country stuff, and I knew that he'd done a lot of other session stuff, but the sheer volume of stuff, when they were kind of running from one session to another, multiple sessions in a day. What was the scene like by the time of the 80s then, when you kind of got involved?
It was still the same thing. There's always been sort of there's always been a vibrant recording scene that I, as a harmonica player, even if you're someone like Charlie McCoy, that instrument sort of comes and goes. It's in vogue or it's not. But for players that are, if you're a good guitar player and or good, good in the rhythm section, then you can work at it and make find your spot in that world of recording sessions. And then there's always like an A team, of which Charlie belonged. Back in the 60s, there was a 60s A team, a 70s A team, 80s, all of that. And so there's those top of the heap players who are just phenomenal, especially in that world of the studio. They really know how to navigate that world and just and some of them are just totally content with doing that, never performing or outside of it. I, on the other hand, I'm kind of the reverse. I really love performing. I like interacting with an audience, and then I always get a little nervous under the microscope in the studio.
I mean, I think getting the chance to speak to you, it would be remiss of me not to mention the video that always does the rounds on YouTube of the performance. Is it Carnegie Hall?
It was Carnegie Hall. It was 2002. And I was on a video shoot with Bill Gaither, who's well known in the gospel world over here, and I had toured with him a number of years earlier and kept an association. And this was the spring after 9/11, so it was Bill had assembled. Like the whole cast of the Civil War was there to help put this thing on. He had every gospel singer and player he could think of, and I was among them. But I was just supposed to be playing in the band that day, and we were taking a little break, and I was standing on the stage with Bill, looking at this empty hall, and I just said, "Bill, this is so cool, to be at Carnegie Hall with you. Thanks for having me." And he goes, "Yeah, it's great." He says, "Hey, do you want to do something on the show?" And I said, "Are you kidding? I mean, you want to give me time on the show?" And he said, "Well, I guess. I mean, what would you do?" And so I sort of gave him the idea, and it was based on something that he and I had done when I used to tour with him earlier. I said, we'll just do a little abbreviated version of it and quickly get to the classical medley. And so he liked the idea. We didn't rehearse it or anything; just kind of did it off the cuff, and it came off great. And ended up making his video, and then a few years later, somebody posted it. I don't know who put it up there the first time, but it started going viral. Yeah. And now every harmonica player I know just kind of wants to strangle me because all their friends and family will send them that clip going, "Have you seen this?" And it's yeah, about 100 million times.
There's a few, running a harmonica lessons website, there's a few videos people always refer to, and just a handful of things that you get lots of emails, what's this, how does he do this, what's that, and your video is one of that handful. So yeah, I need to throttle you as well. But no, it's great, and it's great for the harmonica that that's had so many views and is people are listening to it.
That little piece, it's such a bastardized version of those classical pieces. And it really came about from this sort of desperate moment when early on, when I was just getting to be good on the harmonica, and I was thinking of ways, any kind of novelty song or whatever I could come up with to get the people in the bar, get their attention, and it was, from the get-go, it was a crowd pleaser, and it sort of evolved over a few years before I finally had, those three pieces that kind of segued one into the other. And but once it settled down and became this, it became this sort of crowd pleaser, then I've always kept it in my bag, and I never get tired of playing it. It's so much fun. To work with it, and it always gets the response you want it to.
Yeah. I mean, how did you feel with that crowd? Are you comfortable with big crowds like that? I mean, you say you enjoy the live sort of setting.
Yeah, it was. I mean, because I had been in situations where I was totally nervous, and especially when there were big crowds, or you were in some sort of prestigious place like Carnegie Hall. But for some reason, and you can see it in the clip, I was totally relaxed. and just trying to make the most of the moment and really enjoy and being there with Bill. So thank God for that, because I played it with pretty much ease. In fact, I think the thing I remember being most nervous about was when I started playing, the crowd, as they a lot of time will do, started clapping along. And in a reverberating hall, when people are trying to clap, it can really screw up your tempo.
Yeah.
So I remember just thinking, plow through this, plow through it. Do not listen to them. Just keep the tempo going. And but then it just turned into just a delightful experience. It was probably one of those I was really glad when it was finally over and I could bow and go back and take my seat.
Yeah.
The whole thing about audiences clapping. There's a guy who's a Grand Ole Opry member and a great banjo player. His name's Mike Snyder. And just about every time he does the Opry, he'll get out there with his band and he'll go, all right, everybody, let's clap our hands. He'll get everybody clapping. And he says, all right, and everybody starts clapping. He says, all right, stop. He says, when we start playing, don't do that, because it screws us up so bad. We can't hear ourselves think when you do that. So that's a pretty good trick. If you ever want to just
that's the way to do it.
Nip that in the bud, yeah.
So what's your kind of approach to playing rhythmically and playing fast? I saw something with David Barrett where you kind of said something about a corn on the cob technique or something.
Yeah, let me get a harmonica here.
Yeah.
It's I had a guy one time I was playing, and he was noticing what David Barrett noticed, which a lot of this shifting of the lower jaw, and it's to make these quick moves so you're not having to move your head so much and all. And it was something that just developed subconsciously with me when I was trying to build up speed on the harmonica. But I remember a guy one time was watching me play, and he says, and this was an old country boy down in Alabama, and he said, man, you look like a guy eating an ear of corn while you're doing that. And I never forgot it. So yeah, this is, when you mentioned Mark Graham. So this is like a Mark Graham song that I learned, which was, it's called, Barlow Knife. And I think it's on that album. It goes. So it's this little three-part fiddle tune. And it's got all those little rhythmic things that, you're hearing this. So you got these little pulsating moments when you can just, and that sort of becomes your pivot point. That's your marker that kind of establishes the rhythm and keeps you on the rhythm. So, and really, I think I didn't develop that so much when I was basing so much of my playing on Charlie McCoy's technique, for example. Although, with Charlie was great rhythm, but Charlie was always playing with a great rhythm section. He always had just fantastic country music band behind him, and a lot of my playing, I never had a band. I'd usually have maybe one player going on the road with me or something like that. So it was like, how do two people make this thing feel good? So I think once I started discovering people like Sonny Terry and later on Mark Graham, and hearing just how good they can make it feel just by themselves, it made me want to, pursue more of that type of rhythmic approach. So I'd say that probably has been my quest as well for the last 20 years of playing.
I love hearing tunes like that. Thank you for playing that, because there's something, I think the harmonica is so well suited to that sort of sound, but I'm kind of afraid of playing that sort of stuff because you have to be precise with those melodies, and I feel like I've learned a few. I've probably learned a couple of the tunes off that Mark Graham album. I can't remember which ones now, but a few kind of Irish kind of folk tunes as well, similar kind of tempo and 16th notes and stuff. But I feel like I'm on a tightrope with them, and if I lose one note, I'm gone. What's your kind of? Do you just have to learn them, so well that you never make a mistake?
Yeah, you mentioned being here in Nashville. I'm around a lot of fiddle players and mandolin players who play all this fiddle music, and they just know scores, sometimes just hundreds of tunes. You can get in a jam session with these guys, and they'll pull out some obscure, fiddle tune with a name like 5 miles from. Let's do 5 miles from town. It's like, okay, how's that go? And then they just start playing, and within a couple of times through, they're doing variations, and they're just doing all this improvising around it. And I think, so that's been another thing for me, is like, how do I get to a place where I'm this comfortable to get away from the melody a little bit, but not too far? And, how do I do this well? And I think a lot of it has to do with learning the rules of the game. Like old-time fiddle playing, the masters, they do certain things. They'll never sacrifice certain components of playing that song well. And so, like, for example, in old-time music, it's not so much straying from the melody as it is just putting little nuance here and there just to add a little more interest every time. But you're never sacrificing that melody. Bluegrass, on the other hand, is like a lot of guys won't even finish the first time through before they're starting to depart from the melody and improvise. And the whole name of the game is, how do you keep this thing going without falling off the tracks, And the whole, the thing that really excites a bluegrass audience is the chances you take and how well you can get out on a limb and bring it back, that sort of thing. So I think being around all those disciplines, those schools of playing, has just helped me in my quest to learn those songs and to do it right, so that when I pull out a harmonica, we're talking about string band traditions for one thing, and a harmonica player usually is looked at suspiciously when he shows up for the jam session. So when I get there, I want to make sure I got the rules down and I'm respecting this music, so they'll at least give me a chance, and when it comes my turn to do a solo, I can not embarrass myself.
And what about gospel music? How does that fit into it all?
Well, a lot of people, use gospel sort of as a category. And that's always been a little confusing to me, because gospel music, for one, it's a big tent word. And that can mean, what are we talking about? Black gospel, Southern gospel? Are we talking about, contemporary Christian music? It's just this big tent. And so what happens, I think, is depending on the type of gospel song you want to do. Say I'm wanting to do something that's out of the black gospel tradition, then I'm going to be playing bluesy. It's just the bluesier you can. So, and somebody might play. So they're going to do Amazing Grace. If you're going to do it like white people at a meeting, it's just going to sound like white bread. I never liked it that way, because I always loved to hear somebody put a lot of soul into that. So. So I'm going to be trying to do this like a black blues singer would sing it, and put some of that soul and feeling and all that into it. So I think it's just a matter of style. How do you want to play something? Do you want to keep it sweet and straight, or and sometimes the song will dictate that. Like if it's an old hymn, I'm trying to think of what would be a good example. Something like let's see, something like we're coming up on Easter. I hadn't done it so long. Christ the Lord is risen today. So I'm going to play that probably more in that style, in a straight style. But if I were playing something like, sometimes it'll be a song that sort of traverses both worlds. I'm thinking about something like, How Great Thou Art. can get some bluesy elements in there. I can do some bending and all I'm doing is adding feeling to that melody. So I think it just depends on what the song arrangement is, what the setting is, all those kind of components. Yeah.
So are you still gigging? Do you play with a band?
These days I've cut back a lot on touring and traveling as widely as I used to. So I'm trying to play a little closer to home. And these days I'm just playing in the home with this COVID-19 pandemic going on. I think we're all just stuck in our basements trying to stay in practice. Yeah. But that aside, I'm really enjoying just getting together with friends, playing, doing jam sessions. Occasionally I'll do a concert. This summer I was supposed to go out in California. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but there's a little place I return to every year. So I think whenever I get on a plane and fly to the destination these days, it's usually because there's a relationship in place. This place in California I'm talking about, I've been back every summer for 25 years and played a concert in that area. And so as long as they keep asking, I think I want to keep going back to that. Yeah. Whereas somebody else might call up and describe something, and I'll just have to think about it and go, boy, I don't know. At this stage of the game, I think that just sounds like too much work.
It must be really hard work in the US, it being such a big country. It could be thousands of miles away, the gig.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I love to play, but the road takes it out of you, and the older you get, the harder it gets. So I just started noticing, really, and I'm in my 60s now, but even in my 50s, I started realizing once I traveled all day and not gotten enough sleep, and been in planes and trains and automobiles, and finally get there and do a sound check, that by the time I got up in front of the audience, I was just about spent, and so I started realizing I just can't do this forever. Not the way I do it. There never was enough for me to hop in my Learjet and fly somewhere and have roadies take care of all my equipment. That never was in the cards. So now I'm just trying to figure out what I can do that makes sense for an old guy like me that just really wants to play with a few good friends and do it in front of some appreciative people.
Do you play, if you're playing at home or playing with your friends, do you play a range of, you've talked about the old-time country stuff, the kind of gospel-y stuff, obviously a little bit of classical stuff in that video at least. Do you play a range of stuff when you're at home?
Yeah, I really do. It depends on the day, but I'm usually drawn to the things that I can do kind of well, like fiddle tunes we talked about, and that could be anything from learning old-time tunes. And old-time fiddle tunes are kind of fascinating to me because they're usually not that hard. It's just a matter of how do I play them and play them over and over and get my stamina up so that I can play these because they're old-time music is really built around the dance. So you had all these fiddlers and banjo players, but they might play for 5 or 10 minutes as long as the dancers want to dance. Well, for a harmonica player, that's quite a challenge to just kind of keep playing this thing over and over without running out of breath. So a lot of times I'll come down and just say, I'm just going to work and build up my stamina and see if I can get stronger as a player. Other days I just want to come down and just play with grooves. And I've got a little Casio keyboard over there. It's got like 150 little drum machine patterns in there. So a lot of times I'll come down and just turn that thing on and go from pattern to pattern. What's been really fun for me is to take something like a Latin rhythm and play a Celtic tune against it. And what it does is it forces me to shift accents in the melody. And it makes me a better rhythm player. It makes me a more interesting rhythm player where I'm looking for places to syncopate the rhythm and do things like that. So it kind of depends on it. And usually it's just I'm just down here following a whim of something or other. And I just figure as long as I'm playing something, I'm keeping the dust knocked off and ready to jam when I get the chance.
Yeah. So I've got one last question, and it's possibly a can of worms, I'm not sure, but I saw a great series on the BBC recently. It was about trying to kind of reach the divine or something through music, you know, spirituality in music. And you kind of mentioned the kind of the gospel side of things and the religious side of things. So I'm interested what music is to you. What motivates you to play music? Is it a spiritual thing at all? Is it just a love of music?
It's a gift. I mean, to me, it's a gift of God. That's just an incredible. I think gift to the world for everybody. Everybody loves music, and like during these times that we're in now, usually I wake up and I'm thinking of a way to sing my way through this day, and I'm thinking of songs that. Whether they're instrumental or songs with lyrics, but songs that redirect my thinking. So yeah, it has a very powerful spiritual element to it, and what it can do. I think I mentioned it as a gift. I mean, I believe God gave, like all of His good gifts, He gave it to us to be something that would help us. Man, you know, when somebody's feeling the blues, the best way for me to deal with my blues is sing my way through it, and not to try to sing to some happy place, but sometimes to sing the pain. I think that's the best thing I can do is just sing the pain or play the pain, and it helps me just get in touch with it, be a realist about where I am, and then to me it directs my prayer life, it directs my attitude towards people. It's just an amazing gift, and it's the spiritual dimensions of music and playing. I'm more thankful every day that I got to be a musician in this life.
Well, I think that's a lovely way to finish. So thank you so much for giving me the gift of your presence today. It's been a real honour to, hear a little bit about your life. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
Liam, it's been a total pleasure. Thanks for initiating this. I hope we get to play together one of these days.
I hope so. And, I'm hoping we haven't entered a post-gig era.
Yeah.
Best of health. Stay safe at this strange time.
Same to you, Liam. God bless you over there, and hope to see you one of these days.
I hope so. Cheers,
Thanks
buddy.
for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.